In one of the most powerful moments of episode 7 of Rings of Power season 2, Celebrimbor is exhausted and he looks ghostly, but he's not aware of that because Annatar has conjured up this flattered image of himself and of the world in which he is forging the 9 rings for the humans. And he is suddenly distracted by a mouse. And then he looks into the mirror and all of a sudden sees a glimpse of his true self. The bright illusion of his peaceful surroundings suddenly fades away and the devastating reality of his actions becomes clear. And this single moment encapsulates one of the episode's key themes: the battle between slavery and freedom, which is a motive that runs throughout the narrative and is also one of the main themes in the Bible. I'm Father Roderick, I'm a priest and I'm a geek, and I'm here to share with you the deeper layers of the stories that you love. So let's talk about episode 7. From the creation of the 9 rings, to the dwarves of Khazad-dûm grappling with their inner conflicts and the greed of Durin III, this episode weaves a tale of characters yearning for freedom. Freedom from slavery, freedom from deceit, freedom from their self-imposed chains of pride and fear. At its core, episode 7 presents an existential and spiritual struggle. The struggle to go from being enslaved to being truly free, and what it takes to get there. Let's talk first about the deception of peace, Celebrimbor's struggle. So Celebrimbor, the elf, the master smith of Eregion, has now completed the 9 rings forged for mortal man under the guidance of Annatar, whom he still believes to be an emissary of the Valar at the beginning of this episode. He lives in an illusionary world. The sun shines down on him as he enjoys a peaceful cup of tea, but in reality, he is trapped. His soul is completely enslaved to Sauron's lies. Now, this whole sequence of Celebrimbor and Annatar parallels, of course, the biblical story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. Just as Eve was deceived by the whisperings of the serpent and his promise of knowledge and power, here it's Celebrimbor who falls victim to Annatar's temptations, believing that the rings will bring peace. But of course, it's a false peace because it's all built on manipulation and lies. And then Celebrimbor harkens back to old texts which speak about the way in which Ilúvatar created the earth, using a song, using harmony and beauty. And he says that now that all the noise of the world is gone and I'm here in this peaceful bubble, I can actually hear the song of the elements. And this song of creation to which he refers echoes the biblical notion that creation itself was harmonious under God's design. But just like in Eden, Sauron, and in the story of creation, the snake, introduces disharmony, creating a counterfeit version of the divine order. The moment that Celebrimbor looks into the mirror and sees his true self echoes a biblical passage. And you know it maybe from the first letter to the Corinthians, where Paul speaks about seeing one's reflection dimly, as in a mirror. It's still foggy, but the full revelation of truth is still in the future. And when Celebrimbor finally sees a glimpse of the truth, he realizes that the mithril that he thought would save his people is actually Sauron's own lifeblood. His eyes are opened and he, for the first time, realizes the price that he and the rest of Middle-earth is paying for that so-called gift of Annatar. Celebrimbor's battle for freedom becomes a personal journey to break away from Sauron's influence. Now that his eyes are open, he is still imprisoned by Sauron's power and forced to finish the 9 rings. He attempts to destroy them, But of course, it doesn't work. The rings infused by Sauron's life power are indestructible, just like Sauron himself, seemingly. And that attempt to destroy the rings parallels our own human struggle with sin. He wishes to be free, but he's still trapped, and he's unable to get out of that situation. And then he does, of course, something extremely drastic, which also has I think, biblical roots, or at least there's a parallel in the Bible. He cuts off his thumb so he can free himself from the ring's hold and from Anatar's shackles. It is a significant act of willpower. He even says this is, we'll see who has the strongest will. And this echoes Jesus' command in the Gospel according to St. Mark in chapter 9. Where he tells his followers to cut off anything that causes sin. If your hand causes sin, cut it off. If your eye causes sin, take it out. It's better to arrive in the kingdom of God without your eye or your hand and free from sin than being barred from the kingdom of God because of the sin and still having everything and still having all your limbs. Let's talk about the chains of greed and Durin's dilemma. In Khazad-dûm, we see another battle for freedom unfolding. Durin IV, Prince Durin IV, is caught between his loyalty to Elrond, which is super important to the dwarves. He even says it in this rousing speech, like the dwarven loyalty is the most valuable thing that we have, so much more valuable than the treasures that we gather here in the mines, more important than diamonds and gold. But of course, this loyalty is put to the test because he's facing his father, Durin III, whose heart has been corrupted by greed. And Durin III refuses to help the elves despite the present need and also what's at stake for the entirety of Middle-earth. And instead, he focuses on the unimaginable wealth that the dwarves can gain from the mithril and by digging deeper and deeper. Obviously, of course, maybe awakening very, very dangerous creatures that are like the safeguards against greed. This all reflects something that you see time and again in the Bible, and that is how greed makes you a slave. It enslaves your heart. In 1 Timothy 6, we read that the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. And Durin III's fixation on hoarding wealth exactly mirrors this. He is so consumed by the potential for riches that he fails to see the larger picture, namely the salvation of an entire people. The dwarves, the elves, maybe even Middle-earth. His son, however, embodies a different spirit. Durin IV's rebellion against his father's tyranny is that cry for freedom, not just for himself, but for all of Khazad-dûm. Let's rid ourselves of this destructive greed that has taken hold of my father's heart. I love this rousing speech of Durin IV to the dwarves, convincing them to join him in the fight against Sauron. It's a moment of triumph, and it reminded me of Moses leading the Israelites out of Egypt in Exodus 14. And just as Moses freed his people from Pharaoh's grasp, and let's not forget that Pharaoh was, in a way, Moses is his substitute father. Here too, we see that Durin stands up to his father's oppressive rule and leads the dwarf to freedom from the chains of greed that bind them. Now let's go to the orcs in their desire for freedom. This is something that Rings of Power has, I think, developed in more detail than you see in Tolkien's own writings. In many ways, the creators of Rings of Power are trying to, and it sounds a bit weird, to humanize the orcs. obviously, maybe it would be better to say to elvenize the orcs, to show that they're not just these, evil, destructive machines, but they too have a culture. They maybe even have religious beliefs. And so the orcs are caught in the crossfire of this battle between slavery and freedom. Under Adar's leadership, they have launched this attack against the elves. It's the big battle of Eregion, which is mentioned in the Silmarillion. And here, in this compressed time frame of Rings of Power, we are witnessing this same battle. But Adar's motives are very complex and also impure, you could say. Adar, unlike Sauron, genuinely loves the orcs, and he seeks to protect them. After all, he sees the orcs as the children that Sauron had promised him. And we see a few moments in which he really expresses that love and care for these very, very ugly orcs. And I think that's a quality of Rings of Power, to show us that even in the most ugly creatures, there are elements that are worth it, that are worth of love and friendship. But at the same time, Adar shows that he is willing to sacrifice them. And he pretends that it is to no longer enslave them further, but to ensure that they do not fall under Sauron's control. But his willingness to sacrifice his own children, think of, the biblical motive of Abraham being asked to sacrifice his son for a greater cause that he doesn't even understand. It starts to work in the mind of the orcs. And are they going to be loyal to Adar? Or are they maybe going to defect from Adar because they feel threatened? They feel that he's not really protecting them, to walk straight into the trap of Sauron, pretending to be their new father. I'm sure that we're going to see something like that either in this season or maybe in a future season of Rings of Power. All of this obviously echoes biblical motives of the shepherd taking care of his sheep, laying down his life for his sheep, John 10. And Adar sees himself both as the shepherd and the protector of the orcs, but also as someone who is willing to sacrifice his own children to defeat Sauron. Now there's this incredible scene where we see how the orcs are burning their dead on the battlefield in front of the walls of Eregion. And we see that Adar weeps for them. It's a rare moment of tenderness, and it reveals that even these creatures, often depicted as purely evil, have their own yearning for freedom and love, and can experience tragedy and pain and loss. Adar's battle, in a way, is a muddied, conflicted battle for love. It's a corrupted love, but nevertheless, there is love there. Light versus darkness. Let's talk about the power of hope. In the climactic moments of the episode, we witness a powerful battle between light and dark. Elrond's vow to fight for Galadriel, even as the odds seem impossible, embodies this biblical theme of hope in the face of despair. As the elves make their last stand against the orcs, it seems that all is lost. But Elrond's unwavering faith that Durin will arrive with reinforcements is reminiscent of biblical figures like David, who faced insurmountable odds but still continues to trust in God's deliverance. The Psalms are full of moments like this. In this episode, it seems that it's in vain. It seems that Durin has chosen to stay with the dwarves in Khazad-dûm to try to liberate his father, or at least to defeat his father and the power of that ring of greed. And so he doesn't show up on the battlefield. But something tells me that this hope of Elrond is ultimately going to lead to them showing up. It's just this typical moment in many stories where you think that all is lost and, you know, rescue seems impossible, and then ultimately there is relief, there is help. We'll see, I think, in the final episode of this season. Now, when Galadriel escapes from the grasp of Adar and Arondir saves her, it serves as a reminder that light, no matter how small, can pierce through the darkest of nights. And Arondir here is approaching the end of his story arc and his character arc. Maybe this is to make place for new characters that we'll see in future seasons. Now, Arondir's story is very tragic. This noble elf who fell in love with this woman and then lost her is now on a quest after he is, in a way, has been able to redeem his son. He is now there to kill Adar, to help fight the good fight, and he is willing to sacrifice himself. Galadriel temporarily stops him from doing that, from doing something foolish, but the next day he still dies on the battlefield, or so it seems. Now, this is a beautiful witness of the power of sacrifice, this willingness to lay down your life, even though you may think that it was all in vain, that you've lost. But ultimately, it's sacrifices like this that in Tolkien's stories always lead to the ultimate victory. And there is no sacrifice made in any circumstance that doesn't, in a certain way, will bear fruit in the future. But you can only see it if you have faith, if you have hope. In conclusion, let's talk about the true nature of freedom. Episode 7 of The Rings of Power, I think, is a profound exploration of the biblical theme of freedom from slavery. Whether it's Celebrimbor's struggle to free himself from Sauron's grasp, or Durin's rebellion against his father's greed, or the Orcs' desire to be free and to be acknowledged and respected, this episode portrays the universal human longing for freedom. And yet, as the Bible teaches, true freedom is not just the absence of chains, but it is the presence of light. And there is this amazing moment where Celebrimbor realizes this, and he says, "It is not strength that overcomes darkness, but light." And this is the heart of the episode's message, that freedom is found not in power or wealth, maybe not even in victory, but in the light of truth, hope, and love. Now, as we move towards the finale of this season, the question remains, will these characters find true freedom, or will they still remain slaves to pride, greed, and fear? I guess only time will tell. Thank you so much. I would love to hear your comments on this episode. What were the highlights for you in this penultimate episode of Rings of Power? And of course, make sure to follow for more. I'm Father Roderick signing off. See you next time.